nobody gets to a belief that you disagree with for no reason. They got there because they've had experiences that have reinforced that. They were raised that way. They had trauma that created a certain system that made them pretty sure that something I may not believe in does fit in the world and is really important. And I've had clients all along my whole career who have had very strong beliefs about things that, had they known my beliefs, they might have run the other way. But I believe my job is to take that out of the room, even this year, which has been a really hard time, more for the exhaustion and fatigue that the clients are bringing in, that we're also experiencing as therapists, even more so than who you're going to vote for or whether you're wearing a mask. Just all of the fatigue of living through an unprecedented time. It is a novel experience for everyone.
Welcome back. We are on today with Robin Hornstein on the Tool for Dishes podcast. I'm Angie Sorensen, the founder of AngieS.com. That's Angie-S.com. That's the place to go if you want to be part of my community, get involved with what I do, and have direct access to me. You can also go to my link tree, which I'll leave in the show notes. By the way, if you've been listening to the podcast and it has given you the bug of having your own, I am personally taking on 10 individuals who want to release their own podcast. You'll have it released within 6 weeks. So this will be a beta test. So if you're interested, get in touch via the website. I'll also leave the details in the show notes. It's basically my website address, angies.com/contact. That's it. And listen, I know I ask you this every week, but if you haven't yet, please share this podcast with your friends, rate, review, subscribe to it on Apple Podcasts, follow it on Spotify, for any of the other platforms, whichever way you show love is how you can support this show. The more you do that, the more it helps new listeners discover this show. It takes 2 seconds and it's completely free for you to do. So today with Robin, we are going to we cover quite a lot of different topics, but the overall arch is that today we talk about labels we put on people, how to listen and be open to other people's process when you give them some big news, and how to have a conversation with someone who stands in complete opposition to your beliefs, and how to lead with curiosity and not judgment. Robin is really wonderful, and she's really game to go there in those conversations with me. So a big, big thank you to Robin. And so without further ado, let's begin. Welcome to the show, Robin.
Oh, thank you so much, Angie. I'm so happy to be here today.
Thank you so much for joining me. I've been really super excited to have you on this podcast because when we spoke, and you came in highly recommended from a previous guest as well, who I highly respect. And when we spoke, you know, you are just full of beans. You're very refreshing and just a great woman to come and talk about things like tolerance, peace, love, and what we can learn and do about 2020 without losing our sanity, our friends and family in the process. I mean, that's the idea anyway.
Sounds like a plan.
Yes. So before we dive in, please introduce yourself, where you live and what you do.
Okay. So my name is Dr. Robin Hornstein, and I live in the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area in the United States. I am a psychologist and a health coach. I have done that. I like to say I've done that for about 38 years, and I started when I was 5. So that's really not true. So I'm in my 60s. I love, love, love the work I do. I am married. I have a 26-year-old daughter who is going to be a social worker soon. She's in school, and a bonus daughter who is about to be 18, who's looking at colleges right now. I run a practice along with a business partner. It is a large practice with about 40-something providers that are therapists and family therapists and couples counselors. And also we have people who prescribe medication. And it's an insurance-based practice. And I know you people over there in the UK have a different kind of medical system, but we have in our in the United States, people get insurance, and their insurance covers their co-pays or, money that they might pay in towards coming in for mental health services.
You mentioned briefly that you have a wife, and I know that when we spoke last time, and I'm going to push a little bit on this one because I want you to help clarify the difference between a couple of things.
Sure.
So I know you mentioned you have a wife, and when you introduced yourself to me, you mentioned that you used the word that you're queer.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So can you explain what is the difference between calling ourselves queer or gay or lesbian? Is there a difference, and what is that?
Oh, God. You're asking a question. This question could take us the entire time to talk because nothing captures the essence of who we are. A friend of mine said yesterday, I told her you were going to ask this question when you'd sent me a little bit of, an outline. And she said, oh, you're going on a fool's errand, basically, because who I am, who you are, is not always defined easily by a term. And I think we define ourselves mostly for the other person to be able to say, oh, okay, I get you.
Right.
So in reality, if I'll be bold and say queer is a newer term that is sort of an umbrella, right? It's sort of anybody who identifies in some sexuality space. It may be about their sexual identity. It may be about their sexual preferences. It may be a lot of things sort of will fall under the umbrella of queer. Gay traditionally has mostly meant men who date other men, love other men, although a lot of lesbians have taken that on. And if you talk to me through the lifespan of me, I have used the word bisexual because that fits quite well. I've used the word lesbian. I've adopted and adapted to queer because I think it actually has a stronger unifying statement for me with everyone else who sort of falls on the spectrum and identifies that way. But you can't, you're really doing it for the next person. Like,
right.
Do you care what I am?
No.
But you need to know, because then you have like markers. It's just like, oh, so you're Jewish, or you're Catholic, or you're this, or you're that. And we seem to think that truncates or shortens the need to talk about who the person is, because we have some things that we identify and think we understand. We don't always, but we think we do.
You see, this is so interesting because so the reason why I was asking is kind of twofold. So one is because you mentioned it when we spoke. So I was like, okay, so that must have an importance for you, when you mentioned like you're queer.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other reason, so I thought, okay, there's an importance, so maybe I need to understand what the difference is. And so the other side of it, the flip side of it was, you're right. Like I personally, I don't actually care whether you're queer, straight, gay. Personally, like, honestly, to be completely honest with you, I don't. And I think like it takes too much of an importance. And so I'm glad that you said that actually you can be boxed in. It's hard to, even for me, sometimes I find it hard. I always consider myself straight, but I have had crushes over the years over like women who have the very androgynous look. And I quite like to play as well on, if I had the money, I'd have a whole wardrobe of like androgynous clothes. And I've been like this for years, and I like to have bow ties and ties, and I think like a suit, if I could afford like a really nice Armani suit in black, like I think that's really hot. Like I think that's more sexy than the short skirt. But those are things that, but then I also like to be very feminine in the traditional term. So I think, like you said, you can't really box, and some people are more certain than others. Like I know that I'm, probably 80% to 90% straight.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you can't. And that's why sometimes I think maybe in this world, we find it a bit difficult to know what the terminology that we can address someone, because like you obviously want a person who's not strict on it. You understand there's more to a person than the label. But sometimes it can, in this world nowadays, you feel like, oh, I don't, like you said, like we don't actually care. Like you just want people to be happy, right? So if they're happy.
Well, we're constantly trying to like identify ourselves. And I think it was Patti Smith, the singer Patti Smith, who said that all clothes put you in drag. Like anything you wear, you're in drag, because you're buying into what fashion dictates means. Fashion dictates like that means you look, straight, or you look queer, or you look like a boy, you look like a girl, you look like a they. it's very interesting that, what we choose, is defined by fashion, but fashion is trying to sort of influence what look they're selling at all given time. So,
Yes.
all things being equal, I'm with you. I think some days I feel like putting on a skirt, and some days I feel like putting on like a t-shirt and jeans and Timberlands, and I don't really care.
Exactly.
But it does affect how people who are looking for stability in who the other person is, they want you to look a certain way so they can react to you. And also think like they know you, right? It's like saying, oh, if I say I'm a Democrat, then you know everything about what I believe. You don't. You just know I said I was a Democrat.
Yes. And also it's like sometimes it's good to let people guessing, because I think, and I know we're going to get into like belief system and a bit later on in the show, but I think just as, who we are as a human, like, being too uptight about, or not uptight, but being too worried about how do we define ourselves, which has an importance, especially when you're looking for identity, especially when you're a teenager in your early 20s, you're looking for yourself and stuff. And sometimes later in life, it circles back again and you're looking for, who am I? And that's a very important question to ask yourself. But I think sometimes it can have it's a double-edged sword of like, if you overly think about how to define yourself, a lot of it is also conditioned by how society is at that time. We in the 1700s, we didn't have that kind of luxury that we have today. And I think the main thing is to have that peace within, and whatever how other people look at you doesn't matter. But then at the same time, the other people need to mind their own business. If they want to support, they need to ask questions. But it's a game between, it's like a back and forth game, isn't it? It's important to have, if you want to create change, to be open to have a conversation. But it's obviously more nuanced and more difficult than just that.
Absolutely. And it's also, there are places where it's more dangerous to play this game too.
Oh,
right?
100%. I mean, in New York it's fine, in London it's fine, but in a small town somewhere it may not be.
Right. Exactly.
Absolutely. And actually, that's really good that you said that, because I'm part of a few Facebook groups where we talk about relationship and sex and things like that. And the group is quite open, but it's also like when sometimes some of the other women giving advice, sometimes you have to remind them, wait, but in that person's culture, her maybe dating a couple of guys when it's not exclusive, she could literally be stoned to death. Like, we have to be careful. Right. Like, sometimes you have to also, you're not supposed to always know, but you also have to understand that maybe that advice isn't actually going to help her. So yeah, it's some places it's fine, some places not.
Exactly. And I think you're talking, when you just said that, I thought about the fact that what we're talking about is having some cultural curiosity and cultural humility, and not just imposing our own culture on everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And to be fair, like, sometimes that, it's going to be so inappropriate. But like, I think, because some Muslim women do actually want to wear, they don't mind having their hair hidden and their body, and I cannot find the word, and I should do, because my dad is Muslim. But I just had a lapse in my brain, just gone blank. And there's always a joke, like with comics, it's like, when you have a bad hair day, like, this is great. You never have a bad hair day when you cover your hair. You never had a bad, makeup day, which is obviously taking it really lightly, and, it's with a comedic eye. But some people are happy with certain things. We can't impose that's how we want them to live.
No. And I think that's the problem in general, is when we're more fear driven, I think we do want to impose. We believe that we're right and the other person is wrong, or they're making a choice, or they're not making a choice. They're forced to do something, and maybe they've actually opted to do something, for instance, wearing something that is religious, that, you may say, oh, well, why is she wearing that? She doesn't have a choice. And you know what, you just brought up, like something like Muslim women. I'm thinking, a lot of them are quite happy with the choices they've made and what they're wearing. So I think it's so hard to step back and just let the other person, speak for themselves, tell you who they are, and just let it be what it is. Because I think it challenges our own belief that how we think, how we were raised, what we believe has more, I don't know, gravitas, right? And it doesn't.
Yeah, because it helps us justify our life choices. Where someone comes in and lives differently, it challenges it, and you're like, oh, and unconsciously you are really uncomfortable about it because it challenges your way of life in a way, and you're not comfortable with the difference, maybe.
Yep.
So, but this is actually great that you brought this up, because actually it circles nicely into what I want to talk to you about, because you're a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is something that you obviously live with day in, day out, having, so with your clients where they may have said things that is, deeply offensive for yourself or in deep agreement to principle of life or your values. But I'm thinking like in this year, 2020 has been extremely divisive, more than 2016 with Brexit and Trump. And, now that looks like that was like baby stuff back then to compare what 2020 brought up. Right? I mean, that was nothing. It was a warm up. And so how do you, because that's obviously we understand there's an importance that therapists, not to project on their clients, but with a year like 2020 being so divisive and everything going on and parallel processing, because you guys are going through the same as all of us are, how do you navigate that? How do you not react to, or is it possible to not react? Like, how do you deal with someone with such different views to you, a way of life, when you're in therapy with them?
That is a great question. And that is a question that has come up in a lot of supervision groups, consultation groups that I run or have been part of, in that, my job is not, a therapist's job is not to tell somebody how to live or what to think. So that's already part of what we're trained to do. Even when it's something as divisive as, had you told me 10 years ago that 2020 would be the year of the politicization of a mask, wearing one or not, I would have looked at you like you have two heads. But the reality is, it is not my job. It is not a therapist's job to coerce, convince, or change somebody's life to be in line with what their own beliefs are. It is their job to listen, to help with mental health issues, to help with pain, to help with trauma, and to understand that nobody gets to a belief that you disagree with for no reason. They got there because they've had experiences that have reinforced that. They were raised that way. They had trauma that created a certain system that made them pretty sure that something I may not believe in does fit in the world and is really important. And I've had clients all along my whole career who have had very strong beliefs about things that, had they known my beliefs, they might have run the other way. But I believe my job is to take that out of the room. Even this year, which has been a really hard time, more for the exhaustion and fatigue that the clients are bringing in, that we're also experiencing as therapists. Even more so than who you're going to vote for or whether you're wearing a mask, just all of the fatigue of living through an unprecedented time. It is a novel experience for everyone.
Yes.
And that's going on. Therapists have to pull back on just being in the room for that person. And that's really, really important. And it's work. It's extra work. Now, that said, I think there are clients who will, like the internet has good and bad features. One of the good features is they can go look us up, right? They can look us up and they're going to be able to tell by looking at the website certain things about us. And they may not they may choose to go to a different therapist because they see something that already feels like, I don't think this person will get me. So there is some self-selection out on the part of the therapist, the client, before they even get to the therapist.
Yeah, it is. This is interesting because this year, like you said, like this fatigue everyone's bringing in, because it's such a weird time, because it's, if we to isolate just one issue, like, so 2020, the virus, COVID-19, that's only one of them. Yep. It is an invisible enemy. And when you look through symptoms of people who are going through abuse, right? Emotional abuse, all the symptoms, like, with cognitive dissonance, because you can, like you said, you can go online, but you can Google everything that's going to co-sign your beliefs and opinions, or you can go the other way, but usually people don't go the other way. So people can find enough information to back up their own opinions, regardless which way you're shooting. Right. And so it becomes this impossible battle of reason. And so you have all these different feelings. There's a very emotive year, and that's only one of them. And it's just, that's why this year has been so strange, because we can't always see. Here in London, we don't see the consequences of, we don't have like dead body on the street. Like if it was Ebola, you'd see, I have a friend, he works for the army, and he was in, this is really embarrassing. There was a country, it was Ebola, and he was there to, part of the army to regulate and stuff. And, his cleaner, he found his cleaner dead in the, I don't know if it was the garage or the backyard. So you physically see the consequence of something, right. in your, on your road, in your house, like you can't escape it. So this year has been so strange with that. And I think that's why like the emotions are so high. But you said something really important about people coming to their own decisions because of their life experience. And, like how, like, is, because this year, I find like the problem I have with a lot of different things I'm seeing online and how movements get almost taken over by what I call bad actors, like bad intending people with bad intent. And it's like, people are so self-righteous and they're acting like bullies. And I think what people are missing is that, I'm self-righteous in all my opinions too. I'm a very opinionated person. Okay.
Me too.
So, right. So I know I'm very self-righteous, that I'm going to justify everything I do. But there's also this understanding that I don't hold the whole truth, whether it's on religion or whether it's on race, gender. And I don't hold the whole truth. I don't know. I haven't died, talked to God, come back with a book to write. That hasn't happened to me. So I don't have that. So it's like, so there's this self-righteousness, and people, there's this lack of humility to understand that people have a right to their own opinions. And like you said, they've had a life that led them to stand in complete opposition to you in their belief system around politics, for example.
Sure.
And so it's all well and good for me to like just say that. It's like, well, where do we go from here? Angie is like, so how do we in a conversation gain, I'm almost like assuming or hoping that it's a muscle that you've really had to train because of sitting with so many different types of people in therapy. How do we gain back a sense of curiosity?
Yeah. Yep.
So that we don't have to lead with judgment. And I'm talking about especially like in close relationship, because people can be married 20 years, 2020 happen, and boom, one is anti-vax, the other one is vax. I'm just saying, like, like how do we bring this into our intimate relationships with family, friends, colleagues? How do we survive this?
Well, if I have the answer right now and you and I figure out the answer together, like we're going to be all over the newspaper tomorrow. This is good.
Nobel Prize, here we come.
I know. I love it. Angie and Robin solve it all. I think, look, I want to start back at the beginning. People don't turn into self-righteous, opinionated bullies from nothing. We get there, all of us, with our judgments from a couple things, from what we learn growing up, from what we see, and also from our fear. And I think a lot of the fights, a lot of the difficulty is fear-based. And it's fear-based, and it's supplied by the media. It's supplied in our country by, what comes out every day saying this is going to happen and this is going to happen. The news, I'm not blaming all the news. The news is just acting its part. But I think when we build our positions based on fear that we will either die, be harmed, lose out, not have the rights we believe we should have, that we're better than somebody else, when we build our belief system on that, we do turn into judgmental bullies. And what we don't get is a chance to have a real conversation with people who are different than us. And that's the other thing that happens, is we end up funneled, right? So all the people on the left are talking to the people on the left, and the people on the right are talking to the people on the right. And what the actual conversations where people put down the masks, the other kind of mask,
Yeah.
and the judgments, and say, tell me why you think that. What do you believe is going to happen? What will happen to you? Like, can I respect your opinion even if I don't agree with it? And that, of course, that's in the country, right? That's in any country, that's in cities and in communities. But also, you're right, it's happening inside families. We've had couples call us saying we need couples therapy because we don't agree on protocol for safety for COVID. And we have children, and I want to do it this way, and my partner wants to do it this way. We can't agree, and we're fighting all the time. And so people do come in, and learning the skill of listening to somebody else and saying, maybe now I understand you. I may not agree with you. Maybe we can compromise. That's a skill that, like, I want to see built. And I see a lot of leadership development happening in schools now, where they're like, we need to train kids to be leaders. We need to be train kids to be listeners. And I think both of those skills are so important, because you lose your judgment more and more when you are curious. And even if you so totally don't, if somebody's, here's a hot topic, right? If somebody doesn't believe in the science of how COVID spreads, and we've got all the science all around us saying, this is what we've learned, and this is what we've now learned, and this is what we're seeing. Even if you feel like you want to shake that person and say, but this is science, don't you believe in science? And even then, you have to understand, well, why? Why don't they trust it? What's the history in their lives that has led them to a place that they cannot trust something that, for instance, I, who have a lot of faith in science, do believe in. So I think that's the piece of, like, curiosity that I want to see people bring back into dialogue, right? And that, when I think about, at one point, my daughter and another friend of hers, I don't know, were on a debate team, I believe. And one of the things that was interesting to me is, when you're on debate team, you don't get to pick the topic and the side you're on. You're assigned it. And you may be assigned the side that you would never be on, but you have to argue that side clearly and back your facts, and not be emotional about sort of, this is just right or this is just wrong. And I think that's an art and a skill that we need to keep teaching all of our children and ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you mentioned that, because I think one of the things as well in debate is that when you listen to someone who has a counter argument to whatever you say, you can, one of the really simple phrase in debate is like, you're making good points, you're making some points, but actually, have you included this in your argument? And I feel like we've almost, I don't know what's happened, but I feel like people can't have conversations anymore, never mind debates. And so I'm glad to hear that you have people, people who are in debate groups, because I think it's a great exercise, and ask why. And I think, in a way, that's what the podcast has done to me in a good way, is like, now really ask even more clarifying question. Like when I date, for example, like earlier this year, I was dating this guy, like on the phone, because we couldn't meet up, it was locked down. But he'd say things, I was like, what? And then I'd ask, well, what do you mean by that? Or what is it that you say? And then I realized when he explained, I was like, oh yeah, no, that makes sense. It's just that some people sometimes are not, they use, they're not really good at expressing themselves in words that aren't, like they sometimes choose the wrong words, and it's just, and I do that too. But sometimes people don't have maybe the same habit of how to, they speak slightly differently because they come from a different part of the country than you, and so they speak a bit different. And I'm not from England, so often I actually do have to clarify anyway some like simple stuff because I'm not sure I get it. And so to ask why, wanting to understand, is so important. And the other side is that this is what I feel about, I've been feeling this about the world for quite a while, quite sometimes, is that I feel that people just want to be cuddled. And I don't mean like a cuddle when you hug someone, but cuddled, and they want all the feelings validated all the time. And that's all well and fine. But I feel that it's been flipped. Let's say it's all well and fine. I don't think it's well and fine, because I feel that it has been flipped into people are so used to have their feelings validated all the time, being cuddled. Let's not make people upset. And it's like people are so afraid to say anything in case you may upset someone, come out wrong. It creates obviously this inner conflict. But at the same time, when people are so used to be cuddled and validated constantly around them, whatever community they're in, wherever they live, it feels to me that they automatically think that because someone is asking them a counter question or is not in agreement with them or just do not understand them, they automatically see them as the enemy. And that's why I have a problem. That's why I have a problem with this, because this is where we see. Sorry, I know I'm talking a lot, but it's like this is where we see that. This is what I feel is now this cyberbullying we're seeing a lot, and I feel like a lot of people now have this. They feel they have this freedom to act like entitled, spoiled children. They don't realize it, but all I'm seeing in 2020 is people throwing tantrum left, right, and center like a child. And I'm like, you know what? If you were my child, I'd probably slap you across the face right now because you're acting out. I'm just saying, I know we're not supposed to be, hitting kids anymore, but maybe a bit of fear of your parents wouldn't have been so bad. And I think, and I know it sounds mean, but because those people now, I feel, and I say those is from any kind of different opinions and movements, but I feel there's this trend now where, someone is not using the correct word. Someone is asking you a question, and you can tell when someone has a good intent question or if someone's just being nasty. There is a difference, of course. But if someone's just we're trying to understand you, and I don't mean you, I mean, people online, automatically they just counterattack and they go, I can't believe you think this way, and over nothing, literally over nothing. And
absolutely,
we used to call them trolls, by the way. Those people, we used to call them trolls, and now they justify because they're hiding behind a movement, whatever it is. There's so many movements this year, and some people have really hidden behind. They justify bad behavior because they are fighting for a movement. And I got to tell you this: if anyone had come to defense of me for any reason, so let's say if it was because my dad is Algerian or because whatever it is, let's say if they defended the Algerians and then have a trolling behavior online or in real life, I'd be so embarrassed, so furious. And especially if they were not part of my group, I'd be like, what are you doing? You're not helping me as a human being. All you're doing is creating more. You're giving the opposition ammunition. That's the point. When people are acting out this way, and we all do, I also act out at times, don't get me wrong. I'm a human being. But I also understand afterwards that I'm ashamed because I know I've given someone else ammunition to say something bad about me or to justify their opinions about me. So don't give people ammunition. That's what
you said so many important things in that. I mean, I think part of what I was thinking, so first of all, and this dates me, there's a Carly Simon song where she says, you always answer my questions, but they don't always answer my prayers. And I think we have lost the ability to decide, to know the difference between facts and fictions or facts and feelings. Yes. And so we believe that what we feel becomes a fact. And then you're right, we do the research on the internet or with our groups or whomever, and we're backing up our beliefs without questioning them, right? Without questioning. And you're right, we could call people trolls back, a year ago or 2 years, whatever. But, we also call them bullies. We call them people who they're so entrenched.
But now they're justified. And
they're justified and they're entrenched in being right. And you're right. They cannot take the pushback. And then, I always say, like, if somebody's saying something you really disagree with and they're just saying it in such a terrible, stupid way. I don't know. I can't think of a way to say that better. But ignore them. Like, don't.
Yes.
Why move forward into a fight into a fight you're going to lose when what you're losing is a fight on Facebook? Like, what? Like, what does that mean? You lost a fight on Facebook. In what way does that change your life? In what way 5 years from now are you looking back and saying, damn, I lost that fight on Facebook with that person who believes something different than me?
Yes.
And I think so much of this does. You're right. You said we act like children. I think when we're scared, we act like middle school children. You're right. And
yes.
I'm sorry if I've offended any middle school child who listens to you, but the reality is we do. And not long ago, the American Psychological Association labeled what we were going through as not just a pandemic. They called it a syndemic. Mm. And when they said that, they were looking specifically at the United States and saying we were going through, and you all lived through this with Brexit, but we were going through political unease and instability. We were looking at a systematic oppression of minorities, and the light that got sort of really started to shine on that. And we were going through COVID all at the same time. And if you think about it, balancing any of those things is difficult. And why then wouldn't people say, I'm going to find out what the truth is about this? People started freaking out about words like, we're going to defund the police. And they didn't even understand what that meant. They just thought that meant they were taking all the money from the police and everything would be bad. And so we don't do the research. We don't take the time. We don't have time to be civil. We are not only wanting to be, in your word, coddled, we want our belief validated, but we don't stop. We don't breathe. We don't think. I remember George Carlin, the comedian, said that the reason he was so effing funny is because he lived on a freaking farm. He had nobody nearby and he had time to daydream.
Yeah.
I challenge most of us to say, how much daydream time do you or your children or your friends actually have right now to sit and think? Think about the funny sides of things. Think about the sad parts of things. Think about what's scaring you. Think about why you believe what you believe. Think about why the other person does. We don't have it. We just react immediately. Everything's an immediate reaction. And in psychology, in therapy, we teach people, yes, you have reactions. You have feelings. Have them. Have all of them. But before you have your reaction, which leads to the consequence that will come after that, take a pause and say, what do I do? What is my next move based on my feeling? And also, do I need to make a next move? Can I sit with this? We don't being uncomfortable anymore.
Yes, I love this because this is this is so funny. I just realized who listen to this, they're like, oh yeah, they're just co-signing each other's saying, so they're not really challenging each other. What's the point of the
right?
But no, but I love what you said this because I think, and this is something I only learned a couple of years back, really, really understanding this about when we react, it's actually, it's a neurotic behavior sometimes, and it could be in dating, it could be in all kinds of situations. People have a bad day and, the cashier gives them a bad look and all of a sudden they just react and they think it's about something that isn't, do you know what I mean? And it's a straight reaction. It's your childhood wound coming out in the worst possible place. No, and we all lose it at the wrong time. I mean, no one is losing it at home alone, no one's watching. It's always at a really awkward moment,
Yep.
And in the US, you guys are always ready with your phone filming and it goes viral. I mean, it's just you know what I'm saying? I know I'm generalizing, but that's the kind of a bit the sense we're getting across the pond sometimes. But it's just that when you have, like you said, have your feelings. I think it's fine. Have your feeling, have your emotion, but sit with them. Because when you sit with them, when you have an emotion, when you're having a reaction, it's an opportunity to work on the trigger. And what is best to work on your trigger, because you work on it, you feel super uncomfortable, which most people don't want to feel uncomfortable. They want to be justified and validated, right? And cuddled. So you have to feel uncomfortable, because next time when you go through this and understand your trigger and try to understand, why am I feeling this way? Where's this coming from? Next time it happens, it's not going to be as strong as a reaction. And every time you work on it, all of a sudden, it doesn't matter. Like I used to be triggered by things I'd see online, people commenting on the posts of mine and things like that, like constant triggers. And I say constant, a lot of triggers. And I joined this group that was not moderated, and it's it's like trigger party, like unbelievable. But the person trigger party, but the person who leads this Facebook group says, she's like, I want you to work on your triggers. This is the point. Like people are going to say things you're not going to like. You're going to have a trigger, work on it. And after being triggered and triggered and triggered, all of a sudden I realized, wait, if I don't like what someone said, I know it's my trigger. But 2, I don't have to respond, because if I just log off Facebook, that thing never happened. It doesn't exist. You don't have to react. You don't.
Right.
If it's something, just let them have it. Let them have an argument with themselves. That's all fine. But actually, you don't have to respond to every single thing, and you don't have to react to every single thing. You can work on it in your own privacy of your own home and keep your dignity.
Exactly. And if you're safe, I mean, if you're not safe, that's one thing, but anything beyond, your safety being compromised, which I would say you need to remove yourself or be safe, get someplace else, safe, somewhere safe. But other than that, yes, people can say whatever they're going to say, or your, person you love the most is going to do that one thing that drives you the most crazy. Every time you react to it, does it make them change the behavior? No. And what happens if you move towards someone who just, so to speak, triggered you, as opposed to away from? Or what if you move away instead of towards, whatever your normal reaction is? You find a whole new set of, strengths in yourself. You find new words, you find your voice. And you also find that you don't always have to have your voice. Sometimes you're, like you just said, okay, trigger. You know what? I'm going to go off and do something else. I'm not going to sit here as part of an argument that ultimately doesn't really change my life.
Especially when it's strangers. I mean, and I do also want to, I do want to say, like, this is with the online world. And I try to do this in real life too, but I've got to say, like, when I am in a relationship, like an intimate relationship, I find it hard. So this is all very well and good for me to say this, but I also know that, I have had relationship where the person is very strong, which is good for me, because I'm a strong person. I'm being told by guys, you're quite strong, like you're a lot to. I guess I'm a lot to take. But it's like, so I need a strong man, but it also means that, which I love, and it makes me feel safe and protected. But it also means that I have to take the good with the bad, which means that sometimes they're just going to be so direct, it's going to like really hit, like, in the gut. And I find it hard to not let I can't just turn them off like I can't turn off my computer. And it's hard not to feel crushed under someone else's strength. And I'm sure they sometimes feel the same with me. But it's like, how do we take this in those triggers and stuff? I don't know if we're like going on a tangent, if it's something that you want to talk about, but how do we, because I feel like now when I'm single, I've now that I'm back single, I've gained my strength back. And I'm like, I'm always thinking, I don't want to go back to that feeling of, I feel crushed. Like, I don't feel like this strength coming at me of someone. Like, I just don't know, how do we stay strong when the person we're with matters a lot to us?
Well, that's an amazing question, right? Because what you're talking about is, of course, you're right. The first 3 months of like a new relationship, it's hot and heavy, it's sexy, it's fun, it's teasy, it's, all the good stuff is happening. And the very things you're drawn to may be the very things ultimately that drive you the craziest, which is
absolutely
also, hilarious, but true.
Yes.
But I think what you're also talking about is, we keep going back towards something. For you at this moment when I'm listening, I'm hearing, okay, you keep going back towards strong men. Okay. And then part of you, because you're strong yourself, is like, okay, who's going to win the battle of the strength? Instead of, can we merge together, which means the worst thing of all, you have to both be willing to be vulnerable. And in the vulnerability, you put the strength down. You don't always need, it's like, it's not always war. Sometimes it's just like a little teeny battle, right? It's a little teeny thing about, I don't like the fact that you're late all the time. Like, at first I thought it was kind of cute that you're so busy. Now I think it's really a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
But in reality, if we're always wearing our strongest armor and carrying our biggest sword, the relationship won't work. Because in a relationship, you get vulnerable. In a relationship, you say, you know what? I'm just going to let you have that. That's who you are. And you just said that. I don't have to do anything about it. I don't even have to do what you just asked. I can just say, okay, I hear you. I know that is what you want right now. And what you want to see happen, or how you want this to go tonight. I'm not sure I can accommodate that. What do we do? Right? Like, it's conversations just like the ones we have with strangers online, but it is intimate conversations of, you are entitled to feel that way and want that. You are entitled to feel like, right now you want to protect me, but right now I don't want to be protected. So what do we do in that moment?
Yeah.
We talk about it, or, the other day, my wife and I had a thing, like a moment, and something really bugged me. And what I said to her was, you know what? Here's what's going to happen right now. I'm not going to react well. I know it. I'm just going to be a shit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up and sit in the living room. I'm going to read a book for 10 minutes. I will be back. I just need to check myself. I need to calm myself down.
Yeah.
And I sat down, and she didn't feel abandoned, because I said when I'd be back, and I said what I was going to do. So it wasn't like I stormed out of a room. I took myself out, and about 10 minutes into it, when I was just about ready to put down the book I was reading and come back downstairs, I got a text saying, okay, I'm sorry. I understand what you were saying. And then I melted.
Yeah.
I melted, she melted. And we were both like, okay, that was just a stupid moment. And we could have turned it into a huge fight and not talk to each other for the night, and, stomped around, or, licked our wounds like a dog. And instead we just sort of like took what we needed out of it, and it really let it work. And I think that's the thing in relationships when we teach couples in therapy, like, how do you approach the person? How do you forgive? How do you talk? What's your startup? Do you say hello before you launch into an issue?
Yeah. People don't sometimes underestimate the power of really when you can take ownership. And that person actually that I'm thinking about, I was mentioning before, he was really good. Like, how do you call it? Surprisingly good, because he's kind of like very much like a strong traditional man that like a man's man that you'd picture, right? But he was really, really good at introspection, and he was good at taking ownership. And I think when two people are really good at taking ownership and saying, I'm so sorry. Like, I thought I was being conversational, and I thought that maybe I was being assertive, but I didn't realize that she was coming across like I was not listening to you. Like, I remember one time I sent that to him. I was like, I'm so sorry that you didn't feel like I was listening. I was listening to you. This is not it was not my intention. And I'm so sorry. I'll make an effort. And I remember he said, thank you so much. I just needed to hear that. And I just, things like that. But so that is so true. Like, it's so funny. Like you said, like, once you go away and you calm down, she said sorry without even you needing to say anything, and it's that's a beautiful side of relationship. But I find, like, I think, like, the first bit you mentioned about vulnerability, like that, to me, that's that's really hard for me. Being vulnerable, like really opening up myself.
It's scary. It's really scary.
It's really hard. I find it really difficult. I find it, like, it really is. It feels like a little death. It feels like I'm dying. And I know that, like, my lesson, like, I know that with the last relationship, like, that person being so strong, I knew that person was there to show me that it's okay for me to voice my needs. It's okay for me to be louder about what it is that I want and the issues, but also learning how to say it in a better way. But, like, when I feel crushed, it's also a sign that it's not something that they're doing necessarily. I'm letting it happen. And so I feel crushed, and I feel like I don't have room in this relationship. And that's because I need to learn how to take more space and be okay with that.
Right. And it may also be a younger part of you that is responding too, right? It may be
Completely.
that when you were told when you were younger a certain kind of direction or given a certain kind of response, you felt pretty crushed. And now you have this full adult 42-year-old strong woman who could totally handle it differently, but maybe what's showing up in those moments that makes you feel crushed and makes you want to run away is the part of you that's saying, oh, this is this is scary. I'm going to lose. It's going to hurt. I'm not going to be loved. I'm going to be abandoned, or, the hell with it. I'm going to abandon this person. I think we have to work with those inner voices, inner children inside of ourselves to, as a good frame I use to sort of say, okay, you're safe. And I have this. I'm an adult. I can figure this out. So just sit quietly in a loving, nice way, and let me figure this out as an adult. And that's a real different feeling than just feeling I'm too crushed and I have to go away and you need to get away from me.
Yeah. But I think it's hard when you are opening up and you're being vulnerable, and maybe, I don't know if it's because that person's quite strong character and he's a man's man, but at the same time, he's like a big, dewy, gooey heart, really lovely and kind. There's obviously I have nothing bad to say about him. But it's I think it's hard when I'm vulnerable and, when I'm in a relationship with a man that is strong, I have to be understanding that his response isn't going to be necessarily nice and gooey like I would if I was being comforted by a girlfriend, like a friend who's a girl. So it's that is difficult because when you are opening up and that person's responding and the guy usually wants to fix, they don't like to see you suffering, right, and they feel like they're losing control and they don't, it's very uncomfortable for them. So they just go, well, you should quit, or you should, or entrepreneurship is difficult. There's no oh yeah, no, you're having a hard day, you're doing really good. Right. It's funny because I didn't realize how much I needed it until after it was over, when it was over, and I was talking to this, he's kind of like a mentor, it's 4 courses through this program I was on. And he kept asking, every time he'd call, he says, so how are you doing? I was like, I'm fine, I'm good. And he kept saying, and one day he was like, stop saying that. Stop saying, yeah, and you're fine. I'm really asking you. I want to know, how are you doing? And I could feel he was genuine.
Yes.
And I was trying not to cry, but I couldn't stop it. It's like those cries, it's just coming out. You're trying to hide it.
Ugly crying.
Crying. And I was just and I was in this, in a public place as well. And I was just I'm trying to keep it together. And he was like, I know, but it's okay to cry. I know. And then I just cried. And he said the words that I wanted my ex to say. He said, it's normal that this is difficult. You're doing this all on your own. You don't have to be anymore. We're going to get you some help. And, you've done really good. You've stuck at it for so long. You're really good. You're going to get some help, and, you're doing really well. And not be so hard on yourself. And it was like a virtual hug, right?
Absolutely.
And I cried, and I realized, oh my God, that's all I ever wanted. That's the thing that I couldn't get from him. And it is you can't expect, it's easier for someone who's not, sleeping with you at night to be like he was. Someone who sleeps with you at night, the stakes are higher. They want you to do well. They feel like it's their fault or whatever it is. So it's hard, the expectations, what you want, but what you get is not the same, and how you make peace with it. And I think it's the same with so many conversations nowadays in 2020. You want maybe your parents or your children to be voting the same way, or to have the same stance around Black Lives Matter, or to have the same stance around transgender, all these things, equal marriage. But you may not get the response you're looking for, and then you feel hurt. And it's those relationships are really at stake, at the moment, it feels sometimes. And it's how do we get through 2020 without losing people who've been there for us our whole lives?
That's such a great question. And it's funny because I have an aunt I love very much we couldn't be more different. We've been about as different as you could be from the time I was maybe 15 or so, any not financial, my political awakening, I guess. And we got to a place where there were some things, and it's started before 2016, but things that we just, it just wasn't working. And I finally said to her, I think we need to take some things off the table, because what we do is we just pound at them with our hammer. You know, when you have a hammer in your hand, everything looks like a nail. Like we can't discuss this. And it was hard for her. I mean, she's, 20 something years older than I am. And she got it. So at this point, we've salvaged the love, the history, and things that work. And we acknowledge that we have some very different beliefs about things. And every once in a while, she starts to like gear up, and I can hear the wheels turning, and she's trying to bring them back down. And I think that's what we have to do. We have to be able to say, if we're not able to convince each other, but that's 10% of the relationship. If 90% of the relationship is love. Now, that said, it really can't work if the other person doesn't believe you should exist. So, for instance, if the other person feels like, well, I just don't believe in trans people, and you're trans, and I think,
that's difficult. That's difficult.
Not, I'm not saying accept that. I'm not saying accept. If they say, because of your racial difference from me, I don't think you're equal, or you shouldn't have equity. No, that is not a conversation we compromise on. I'm not saying compromise on those things at all. What I'm saying is the things that are almost unimportant, in that you can't convince somebody to vote the way you want to vote. And in the long run, this year turned into, if you vote this way, it means you hate these people. If you vote this way, it means you hate these people. And that is very heartbreaking for me to look at, because that is how it's been painted. And I believe there are some truths in there, but I also believe there's some flaws in that picture, and that there is a lot more tolerance than I think we see. But I think it's fueled by the internet, fueled by the media.
I think it's a big generalization, and I think it's a very dangerous stance to have, because it's a dualistic way of looking at the world, which, in philosophy and therapy, it's a big red flag, in a sense that it's a bit like, what Bush used to say, you're either with us or you're against us. And the world doesn't live like that. That's not life. Life is really in the gray, in the nuances, like even yourself, you're saying, the way, I don't want to be boxed under one word. It does, it helps maybe people to understand me better and how to relate to me. But effectively, I'm more than just queer. I'm more than just that word. That doesn't define who I am as a human. And I think it's like saying the way you vote does not, shows a bit like, what your preferences may be like with immigration or the economy, healthcare, all that kind of stuff. Absolutely. But it does not mean automatically that you hate or love.
Well, no, I think
it's
right, because
it's unfortunately that is how they profile it on the media, and it's how it kind of looks like. It definitely looks like it, but I think if you were to look at the individual, it's not true. And I think, unfortunately, not everyone is like you, can be introspective and understand the nuances. A lot of people just look at the news and just assume that, that person voted this way, that means they hate me.
Well, it also, and it can, and that's the worst part for me, because it can mean that. Sometimes they're voting on one issue, abortion's a big issue. It'll be like they've really made that decision about who they're voting for because of abortion, but they haven't looked at what that actually means on the left or on the right, or in the Democrats or Republicans. They've been sold a bill of goods that this group does this about abortion and this group does that. And what they forget is that, maybe that's their big issue, but they have a gay son that they totally love and support. And they've gone to marches with this child. And suddenly, they're voting in a way that if laws are made, would be against that child, but they believe they have to make the decision because of the one thing that's more important. And I think this is where identity politics and all these sort of crazy inflammatory things that come out, that it just scares the crap out of people. And then they end up forgetting that different votes do affect laws that do harm people that they love. Yeah. Even themselves. It may even hurt their own finances or their own situation. and it is, look, I paint this picture of sort of my therapeutic neutrality. I got plenty of opinion about all of this.
Of course.
And it makes me absolutely nuts. But, we do need to understand that in this country, everybody gets a vote, and we may not like how they vote. We may actually know that vote might hurt some people and not hurt others. We may have to not talk to people about how they voted. It's been so intense and so hard to manage.
It's been hard to watch. It's been hard to watch on the TV from across the pond. Like literally, like it's been like, oh my God, like people are preparing for war. Like regardless which way it go, like we're actually being worried watching the TV, going, shit is gonna get like shit's about to hit the fan big time. It's like it's frightening. I find it, to be totally honest with you, I find it really scary that, and I'm not into. I mean, I always say I'm not into politics, but I do follow it. But like, I don't really know much is what I'm saying. And I'm not American. So I don't feel like I have a say in what is best for your country because I don't live there. I don't understand the history because I haven't lived it. Does that make sense? So I can have an opinion, but it's not really justified. I don't think, I don't think I can make a past judgment on anyone, how they vote over there because I don't really understand it properly, So I think, but what I find scary is when they put, I'd see online, like they say, this is what the Democrats believe in. This is what the, you said conservatives over there?
Republicans.
Yeah. Republicans, thank you, sorry. Republicans believe. And it's like, sometimes some of the points you're like, well, how, as a human being, like, how do you make a choice? I can't imagine that every single person in America has believed all of the bits that were like, the bullet points they were putting down. I'm sure there's more to it, but there was like 10 bullet points on each side about what it meant. Like one was defund the police, one was the abortion, the weapons, all this stuff,
But everybody was having such strong opinion. It must be hard to watch for you guys. I mean, like, yeah.
Oh, it's hard. It's hard to watch because you're like, how can one person? It's like we were watching. It's like, well, actually, there's a little bit of right in both, and there's some deeply wrong in both. Like it was just like, how do you make that decision? Like, it's almost like, I understand there's a decision to be made and some values are going to be stronger, but you could almost see, like, when you're on the outside, you think, wait, but there are parts in it. There's like, because remember you said the defund the police. What I understood by that is like remove the police and then go back to the Wild Wild West. And I was like, how does that make sense? Because back in the Wild Wild West, this wasn't good for the Black community. Like, how is that good? I don't understand it. Like, but that's from like a non-American person who's not into politics. Like that's what I read, and thank God I don't have to understand because I don't have to vote in the US. I'm not American. I can't vote that day. But it was just like, that doesn't really make sense. Like, take away I don't want my neighbor with a gun to make up their mind if I'm guilty or not. That doesn't make sense to me. But so it's a bit of a very naive take, but just watching and watching people being so strongly emotional about it was very scary because in Europe in general, most of us kind of keep our political opinions to ourselves, and it works quite nicely. But it's like I cannot imagine that I'd have to prepare for war over election. That to me was really uncomfortable to watch, and it was really disconcerting because it's like, this is supposed to be the country of the free, like in the anthem, the country of the free, and it has a large influence on the rest of the world. And it's like, shit, because often what happens in the US spills over in the UK and the rest of Europe. And it's like,
well, that's the other thing. We're a global power, and we're also a global this is a world we're dealing with. We're dealing with things like the environment across the world. We're dealing with the pandemic across the world. We're dealing with like having allies and trying to stop, genocide and like the immigration issue here and all of these things. And as a therapist, I have opinions as a human about them. And then as a therapist, I have opinions about them. I've done, reports for people trying to get visas into our country, because of abuse, or they might be killed if they went back to their country. Like I have very strong feelings about it, but it's like, okay, what's sitting in front of me in terms of like, who am I working with? How can I help them? How can I, lead them not lead them. That's terribly paternalistic. How can I give them the most amount of support to hear their own voice, to make their own decisions and their own choices? And during this particular time with the election and the pandemic happening at the same time, it's been crazy making. I had a therapist one day, and I hope she won't kill me. I won't say her name. She works with me, and she texted me and she's like, how the fuck am I going to be a therapist today? It was right before the election. She's like, I can't therapy today. And don't tell me self-care, because I'm just going to be really mad at you. And I love her so much. And I cracked up and I was just like, okay, I'm not going to tell you self-care. I ain't going there. Yeah. But it's, it's like, our feelings are like, we're feeling from every nerve ending, right? Yes. Where there's not a place of stability. And as humans, it's almost like the part of our brain that sends out all the information that we're in danger. It's been on high alert. That is extremely hard on our health. That is extremely hard on our mental health. And it is why therapists have said, do things like meditate and take walks and do exercise and try to be gentle and kind with yourself. Look at your productivity and don't compare it to before COVID. Look at what you really need in a day. Like, do you need a nap? Okay, take a freaking nap. It's like, if you have the luxury to nap. At this point, we also have people who lost jobs because of the pandemic, and they're in extreme like fear, and there's difficulties about whether they're going to be evicted from their places. And
in the US, it's very different to here in Europe. When you lose your job, you actually get support. There's the welfare. I mean, it's really tough out there. I really don't envy you. And it must be strange, because the US is seen as, for a lot of people, like, this leader of the world and the free world and the epitome of democracy and the way. But actually, when you look in from the outside, it to me, I used to want to go back to New York for a year, because I lived there for a few months when I was younger. I absolutely loved it, fell in love with it, cried when I left. I was like, I love the mishmash of all the people. I love how direct people were, sometimes really abrupt and rude, but I kind of loved it too. I was like, this is so refreshing. This is great. And that was in 2001. And I think, but then now I don't want to go back, and it saddens me, like, to live for a year, because I'm like, it's anything but free. I feel that's how I feel and it's just, like, things really need to change. I know this conversation has taken such a different turn, but but in a way, it's kind of part of psychology, right? Because I think to feel safe, and I think when you lose your job, or if you get sick, and that means that you're unsafe, that is not a good place to be. That is not okay. In the number one, whatever, I don't know how we call it, but the US is a big deal in the world. Okay, it has a big influence.
It is a big deal in the world, and it's not okay that we're not safe, right?
It's not okay that their population. I know it's a big country, a lot of people, so it's more expensive. But then that's why we have taxes. That's why there's shit in place. But that's not okay to me. It's almost, it feels like a country that just found democracy sometimes, because it is so. Like, I really felt scared for you guys. And I felt scared even for me, because I'm like, is this going to spill over in Europe? Because it's got such a big influence, and it's a frightening world. And I think this is why, if we start at home, and this is why I think maybe this conversation is so important, and the work that you do is so important, because if we can start, we can't change the politicians. When are we going to go and meet Biden and Trump one-on-one and have a conversation with them in a sit down? You know what I'm saying? It's not going to happen, is it? So
no.
But what we can do, because in this world where we have to accept that in order to grow, we have to do things and that we can't control the outcome of, and we need to be okay with having unpopular opinions and views, because nowadays that's going to have to happen, because there's so many unpopular views that everyone, everything that we say is going to be offensive to someone else almost,
Sure.
But what we can change is what we do in our home, with our friendships, with our family. How do we treat others? Because that's going to effectively have a ripple effect. And so it is actually an important thing to be aware of. And I don't know how to, if you are, let's say, whether it's with a parent or a couple, let's say if you're a couple and, the other person is not telling you not to exist. Like, let's say let's say they just look at the world very differently. And maybe you, as a couple, you go out with your friends and you may be worried that the other person, or they're worried that you're going to say something that's going to be cringy. Mm-hmm. How do you feel comfortable that well, actually, that person is different to me. That's 20% of our relationship is maybe really different political views. But how are we okay as a couple in a group that one of us is going to say something cringy to the other? Like, how do you live with that?
Yeah.
Because you're going to be embarrassed, right? And ashamed.
Well, no, you are, but you also, maybe you're not, because the thing is, if we're in a couple, we're two adults and we're individuals, and we are, there are certain parts that make us a couple and certain parts that make us individuals. And I think when we have boundaries, we let, I guess if the other person is so radically different that it's offensive or hurtful, maybe you don't even want to be there. But if it's a person believes something very different, if you have a boundary and the other, a friend says to you, how can you deal with that? You're just like, they're entitled to whatever they're thinking or saying. I don't agree with it, but that's their thing. And it's not necessarily, it becomes a reflection on me, but is it a reflection on me? I love this person because 80% or 90% of the rest of that person is kind and generous and giving and volunteers and, does all this cool stuff and takes care of their aging parent, whatever it is. But I think it is really hard to not feel like we all need to be clones of each other. And we don't have to. We really can be different, and we can be different, and we can educate ourselves about why the person is like that. And we can go someplace and we can go to a party. Thank God I want to go back to parties. Are they coming back soon?
I know. I
want to go. But we can go to a party and they can be in the corner, pontificating about something that we think is really just like, what the hell? Oh my God. And we're like, yep, they really, truly, I don't know, believe that. And then I'm sure I'm cringeworthy. I mean, like I have very strong opinions about certain things, especially about the fact that I believe there should be universal health care, which would certainly help people with mental health, but also, it would be the honorable and correct thing to do in our country. And when I say that out loud, actually, it's really funny. I said that to somewhere, and somebody overheard me in a line or something. And they're like, "Oh, you're a communist then?" And I'm like, "Actually."
Well, then most of Europe is a communist, well done,
Yeah, I'm like,
whatever.
Well, I'm actually, do you know the difference between a social democracy and communism? Like, I think you got to let's make sense of what those words mean. First of all,
Denmark is a social democracy. I mean, I don't know if it's at the moment, but it is a believes in healthcare, and the quality of life is fantastic, and you have the right to your opinions.
Exactly. And yes, the taxes are high, but I read this book called, and this is really off topic, but I read this book called The Nordic Theory of Everything. Uh-huh. And when I finished reading it, I was sobbing. I was like, wait a minute, like, universal health care, time off for parents when they have a child,
and for fathers as well. Like, it's not just
fathers, mothers, two couple. If they're a gay couple, they each still get a time off. Like, all of those things. And I thought, okay, but let's look at the downsides. Maybe okay, so what's their immigration policy like? How many different kinds of people live there? Whether ethnic or whatever. So there's good and bad in everything.
There is good and bad in everything, absolutely.
But I was like, oh my God, like, I know I have some pretty strong views about what we could do that would fix certain things that would also make a mess of other things. Because if we got rid of the way our healthcare system works, it would be such an overhaul of our taxes and our insurance companies and who makes money off of the pharmaceuticals. And, it would really have a ripple effect in everything.
It should be a basic human right.
It feels like it to me.
That you can get a stroke and not end up on the street. I mean, that to me is, it's, I don't know if human rights even is the right term. It's just like human decency or care of the other.
Well, and I think care to everybody, every single person in this country. I mean, when we look at the numbers of COVID, we see that, people who had it the most were people of color and indigenous people in our country. So, and I say this as a white person, let me say that out loud. And I just think, okay, so what does that number tell us about whether we're getting information into the communities, helping the communities, whether we're partnering with the communities to work with them to understand how this is, what happens to the fact that a lot of these are people that may be afraid because things have happened to them in the past. Like, again, it's like, so there's so much to unpack.
Yeah, in Denmark, that conversation happened too, where they were saying, so see, a lot of the immigration in Denmark is Somalia and Turkey. Now, I may be wrong there, but this is what my understanding. And when I was over there on the news, it broke that they said, obviously that Somalians were. It became a whole controversial debate because it was saying like the highest number in communities where Somalians was having it. And I think people were like interpreting many different ways. And I think the problem was that then people were like a bit worried when they were seeing a Somalian. And obviously in Denmark, you can quickly see who's white and black because Danish, I mean, I'm brunette, but I'm half Algerian, but like, you can tell a difference quite easily. And I think it wasn't so much, so it kind of also feels like a racial thing. But I think what people they were trying to explain is that they were saying, because obviously, unfortunately, and I think like in many places around the world, in Denmark, there's, I guess like it's like a ghetto, if you like. So they all live together in this high rise. They're more highly populated in a smaller space, right? Partly because obviously of finances, obviously, and so financially it's a problem. So that's why they're in smaller spaces, and so it was in a high rise. It's going to spread more quickly. Like let's say if you're in a nursing home,
right? There's explanations for all of these. How we're not helping people.
Exactly. There was a controversy whether it was the right thing to make that information public. And also to understand that it's not because the virus is not racist per se. It's just that because if you live, it could happen to you. It's just if you live, and it's the same for poor white people. If you're living in a high rise and you have a large family, you're more likely to spread it sooner. It's just a question of mathematics. And that's
yes, it's not a question. It is, this pandemic is not about finances. It is not about ethnicity. It is not about sexuality, gender, race, but we see things happening to certain people that are more marginalized. I can speak mostly in the United States, but you're right, Denmark, everywhere else, because of lack of access, lack of support, lack of information.
And you have lack of access, lack of support because you don't have the finances, right? Because if you are a wealthy person, doesn't matter of your race, you are going to have your private doctor, your private this, you're going to have a big house, like I'm thinking Atlanta, Beverly Hills, there are some really wealthy communities out there of, I think a variety of backgrounds, right?
Yeah, no, and you're right. Class is a big.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a financial issue. It's not so much of the virus is looking, it's the dense population and it's just down to mathematics. That's what it is. And it's a numbers game almost, it's like if you're 10 people in a small flat and one gets it, well, there you go. It's going to be faster to spread to more people than if you're one person or two people in a big mansion with a large garden,
it's a different job and you have money and you can have your food ordered in. There's just so many pieces.
So many factors.
And it all affects, to go back, just because I feel remiss not to, but to go back to the point of, so what happens to the mental health of people who are chronically underserved, chronically under-resourced, and and more likely to be hit by something like this pandemic, whether it's job loss or whether it's getting sick and not having access to medical care, whether they're, all of these pieces are so important to the mental health of people, right? They're losing, whether it's they lost somebody to COVID or whether it's because they're scared or whether they're depressed, anxious. Anxiety is so high. And I'm going to go out on a limb here. The anxiety in this country, in the United States, has been high and higher during COVID, but certainly I think higher since 9/11. We have not felt the same level of that arrogant safety I think we felt in the United States, and I include myself in that.
Yeah,
I think 9/11 shook the foundation of people, and I think it made for a much more robust group of people with anxiety. And now we have this, and I think everybody deserves to have someone who can support them, who can talk to them, who can help them through the fear, because, people are starting to self-harm more, eating disorders are up, people are, expressing suicidal ideation, if not, opting to
absolutely
have an attempt. I mean, it's worrisome as a therapist, and it's a lot to carry as a therapist. So all of these things are really, really important and key. So,
And that's such a key thing that you brought up, because it's true. A lot of things, I mean, when you are living in fear, this is I'm going to say something that it's not, I don't know how it's going to come across, but whatever. Because you mentioned 9/11, right? So I don't know if you remember, there was a Paris attack in 2015. So that was on my birthday. And I was there for my birthday, and I was actually down the road.
Mm-hmm.
When you experience something like that, it's something you can even feel on a cellular level. When you walk out on the street, something's changed, like drastically changed.
Yep.
And I remember for in the moment, I'm very much like in a very dangerous situation. I'm very like, I see very clearly, and I'm like, okay, what's the next step? I just wanted to go back to my hotel. That's all I cared about. So I could just go back. Anyways, I'm not going to go into the details, but basically afterwards, once I realized, when it dawned on me what happened, and the fear sets in, and I stayed home for 2 hours. When I came back to London, I stayed home for 2 days. I didn't speak to anyone. I couldn't even turn on my phone. It was just like, I just had to just be alone.
Mm-hmm.
And this was at the time Trump was running his campaign. I remember that was the time when he said we should cut the internet and we should stop Muslim coming in, right? That was the big thing at the time. Yeah. Now I just came back from Paris, right, 2015. Just came back from Paris. The people who got caught, the stories are basically, a lot of them were Algerians from Belgium. Now, I'm half Algerian. I grew up in Belgium, and I even think that I knew one of them when he was a child, because I used to volunteer in this really rough neighborhood. So I used to volunteer with these kids, and I think I remember him because it was the same name, had those glasses. Anyway, it may not be him, but I have been around the community. I am half Algerian, so I felt a lot of different emotions.
Mm-hmm.
One of them being shame and anger. And I was like, here we go. This is not going to help our cause one more time. What we did not really liked in Belgium and France, like, this is not fucking helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of feelings, but also when I was living in the fear for a few days, when I was hearing Trump saying, let's cut the internet and no Muslim going in, I was just like, in that moment of fear, I was like, oh, wait, maybe that does make sense. Maybe we should cut off the internet and not let any Muslim coming in. Like, I swear to you, this is what I thought. I was like, and then in that same moment, like literally, I was thinking that for like, I don't know, a few seconds or however long it was. And then all of a sudden I was like, wait, what the fuck are you doing, Angie? That doesn't solve anything. This is crazy talk. This is like crazy. But in that moment, and I'm grateful I had that moment, because in that moment, I understood, I don't agree, but I understood why people were backing him up around those arguments. Because when you live in fear, and you guys had 9/11, when you live in fear, things like that make sense because he talks directly to your fear.
Exactly. And then he sounded like a strong person who was going to fix the problem.
Exactly.
And it gets back to our sense of having some paternalistic, strong figure that's going to make everything better.
And it's someone having like a drastic solution to a drastic problem, but it doesn't solve anything. And
it does not solve. No.
And the only thing that saved me in that moment to not go completely, which is ironic, because my dad is Algerian and is Muslim, but to not go completely anti-Muslim and stuff, to just not lose my mind, was that I have, because of my background and my life and the things I've lived, I was just like, no, that does not even make any sense. But I had to go in that moment of fear, and it really shook me. I was like, wow, that's how easy you turn people.
Oh, yeah.
This is why in 2020, this is why I feel so strongly about conversations. I feel so strongly, if someone doesn't agree with you, don't hammer them down. Let's say if someone wants to ask about the transgender community, if someone is public about it, put themselves out there, they have to be willing to get something back. They have to, because it's one of those things where they say this, and it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's BLM, transgender, whatever it is, whatever movement they are around. It's like someone who someone who's in something has had the whole life. Let's say for me, I'm 42. Let's say if tomorrow, if I came out saying I'm going through a transition and I'd like to be called Henry, for example, right? Now, I had 42 years to live with this. I've had maybe 10 years of proper processing, and I've maybe had 6 months to get the courage. I'm just making those numbers up, but I had a lifetime of understanding something was different, or that something I wasn't comfortable with, and I had time to process it. The minute I opened up about it and I landed on other people, and I opened this to someone else, I said to a parent, like, I had time to process this. This is not news to me, but this may be news to them. And I think
right, they need time to process, and they need to hold. You have to be able to hold space for them to process. The only place I'll diverge from that is you have to be safe. So if by some things you can pass, right? You can pass for, nobody may know you're, biracial, right? You may have skin that people can't read.
Yeah.
But if you are saying something where by being yourself, you are going to be different, look different, act differently, then you have to hold space for the other people that love you to react. They may not react well. And you also need to be clear, it may not be safe to tell certain people.
Yeah.
And that's where we end up with people that are struggling with such mental health. People will say, there's more mental health issues in that community. And I'm like, damn straight there are, because they have less support and less love.
Yes.
And it's not because they're crazy. It's not because they have pathology. It's because their families kicked them out. Somebody doesn't, love them. They lost their job. Like, unless we have safety of, movement and safety of being who we are, we can't really be our authentic selves, which does create a mental health problem right then and there.
It does. And I think, and that's a very good point that you're bringing up. I think what I always, I feel like it's just that I guess it's just to have this understanding that when you land, and it's a big news, this is not a small thing. Like, if you land a big news on someone, it's like when you land someone that you want to get divorced. This is not small news. Like, you've psyched yourself up to break up with someone, but they may not be ready for this. So it's like, whatever is the big news you give, it's like giving the opportunity for the person to process it. Give them time. Don't expect them in under 2 second flat to go through a
because you've lived through it. Right.
Yeah, you've had 42 years to get used to, or I've had 42 years to get used to it. They haven't. This is brand new to them. They may completely shocked. And I think it's like, sometimes it's that humility of, remember, actually, how did I feel? Now, and this was hypothetical because it's not my situation, but how did I feel when I realized I may have also gone through some discomfort myself and inner conflicts, and you're going to prepare yourself for a hard life, because this is not going to be easy out in society, especially at the beginning. And so it's like, give the other people a chance. And the reason why I'm saying this is because when we are not letting this news land on someone else, and we're attacking them because they're not being as understanding, that they're not being understanding or caring the way that we wanted them to be, we are giving them ammunition not to support us. Because if you then go, well, you just, I don't know, whatever, I haven't sat in those conversations, so I don't know, but let's say if it goes wrong and you start to insult them and tell them they're lesser human being because they're not accepting, they don't understand, people don't necessarily need to understand, but they have to accept you eventually, right?
Well,
that's a big difference.
Close to you and in your life, you can, it's not. And I've had so many clients say, I came out and my parents said, well, we love you, we don't accept or respect this choice, and you're going to hell. So that's not really support to me. That is a really
that's hard. That's
situation.
Hard. Yeah.
So it really does depend.
I guess it's probably, I guess maybe I have a bit of a naive view on this, but I think it's more like, I feel like I see this online, like people are not allowed to have this conversation. It's like someone may be an expert around politics or gender, whatever it is, right? They're an expert because that's what they live and breathe. And then someone who isn't, who's actually trying to ask, and actually because they want to support and understand, it's like everything. It's like, we may not get the questions we want, we may not get the reactions we want, but give people a minute. And I think if you give people a minute, they may come back around. Maybe people's first reaction is, what the fuck? And you know what? They have the right to have that feeling, because that's their emotions. They're just reacting. We wish they'd had it in their own room and they kept it to themselves. But unfortunately, it doesn't always work that way. So I think just give people a chance, because sometimes I believe in second chance, and I believe in giving people just time to get back around to things. And I think that's I guess that's why I want people to get away from this.
Yeah.
It's just give people a minute. And if people still don't want to know about you, they're kicking you out, that's their loss, and that's their prerogative, and that's their belief system. And you can't change that. And now you have to be okay with that too. You can't change. They may think you're going to hell, but then you have to make a decision. It's the hardest decision ever. Then I have to cut these people off my life, perhaps. That's an option you have to be ready to, and that's a really difficult one. And I understand why people stay in the closet, because they don't want to cut those ties.
Right.
It is tough.
It is really tough. You know, I know this is the silliest thing. You had one question that cracked me up on the outline, and I don't know if we have time, but the question,
go ahead.
What would you tell your 18-year-old self?
Yeah, that's coming. Yeah, but please take it. Yeah, please.
Can I jump there?
Yeah. Take the floor. Absolutely.
I was laughing so hard at that question because I have to tell you exactly what I would tell my 18-year-old self, who was into glam rock, was like a complete Bowie freak. I had the most gorgeous wedgie shoes that were like platform shoes that were made with a cloth fabric with flowers on it. They were so beautiful. And I threw them away. And if I could go back and tell her, whatever you do not throw away those shoes.
Yeah.
That is because, come on. I mean, my 18-year-old self would not have looked at my 64-year-old self and said, thanks for, the advice about like learning to listen to other people. I just want to say, don't throw away those shoes. I want them later.
Yeah.
So that was the question. I had to just jump there because I was like, I love that question so much. And that's truly my answer, which may be the worst answer ever. It doesn't sound profound, but it is really fucking real.
No, I think it's great because we had quite a profound enough conversation anyway. I think it's I think it's okay to end up with good shoes because, there is a jacket as well, a coat that I wish I hadn't thrown out as well. Actually, you just reminded me, and I'm like, that one looked really good. So I had a bit of a gothic stage, and I was like, this was a perfect coat. And now, that one is gone forever. And so actually, I'm going to ask you straight away, like, this is the second question actually that all the guests get to answer. It's like, what stuff do you not put up with anymore?
What I don't put up with is more like comes from me, not from outside. I actually don't care if people like me or not anymore as much as I used to. I just don't give a shit. I think it's like, I'm going to be who I am. I'm going to say what I think. I'm not always going to have that be met, as you said before, with coddling and people liking me. And I try not to like worry about it. That's one thing really important. I also, if somebody's saying something that is just so horribly misogynistic or racist or whatever, and I'm in a place, not in a therapy room where I'm going to have to, and I do address it there, but I address it very differently than if I'm just sitting around. I'm just not going to be silent about my opinions about it. I'm going to say, how could you possibly believe that, Black lives don't matter? Like, what the hell is that? And it's really important to me to like, just say those things, whether or not they're met with like, oh yeah, thanks. So that's the kind of stuff I don't put up with anymore. I hate when people don't treat people with civility. Like I really don't like, back in the day when we went to a restaurant, people not being nice to servers. Like there's stuff that just like, can be nice to people. Like it doesn't cost any more than being an asshole.
There's nothing more cringeworthy. I mean, we can all have a bad day. Don't get me wrong. We can all have a bad day. But if it's something that someone does every single time, I can't do it. I can't get down with that. I'm out because I used to be a server and actually got a coffee shop job again, like a couple of days a week because the economy is so. Because I just back to my old skills, and I can't. I always like when I look at people coming in, I'm like, if they're having a bad day, and it's that one time they're rude, I don't care. But if it's something every single time, listen, they're lucky that coffee machine is at in bright daylight because otherwise they'd get a sneeze every once in a while.
Exactly.
Not that anyone's been rude, actually. They haven't actually. No one's actually been rude. I've been quite surprised. But it's just, if it's like a character trait, no. If it's a one day off, you have an off day, we all allow it to slip, but not like a habit. That I agree. That's pretty gross. Robin, this has been so, so wonderful. Thank you so much for being game with me and going to those places and, telling me how you see things. And it's been just a really enjoyable conversation. I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you for being able to go there with me, and I really, really enjoyed it. So can you please tell the listeners that where can we find you? How can we work with you? Like, give us all the stuff.
You can find me in a bunch of places. You can find me on Instagram at Robin Mindful Counseling. You can find me on Instagram at HP Therapy. You can also find me on my website at www.hptherapy.com. on LinkedIn under Robin Hornstein or Hornstein Platt & Associates. So I'm kind of all over the place. Facebook, also, there's Hornstein Platt & Associates as well. So, or I think that might be under HPA now, but it's HPA or it's Hornstein Platt & Associates. So that's where you can find me.
Perfect. And do you work with people like telehealth, like online?
I do health coaching and therapy online. I do, yes.
Perfect. Okay. Well, this has been so wonderful, Robin. Thank you so much for your time today. Thanks for being on the show. And, maybe hopefully we'll get you back as well at some point.
I would love to come back. It's a hoot to talk to you. I loved it. Yep.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Angie.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
And that's our episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to rate, review, share it, subscribe it on iTunes, follow it on Spotify or whichever platform you listen from. However you show love is how you can support this show. Drop me your questions or suggestions for future episodes via the website at angie-s.com or come and find me on Instagram at Tool for This Shit Podcast. See you next week, and until then,
using health inappropriately.